Do you often feel guilty about things that you do and don't do in your relationships? Then you're most likely suffering from false guilt. False guilt is when you don't do anything wrong and you feel guilty. True guilt is when you do something wrong and you feel guilty. Here are some reasons that you might struggle with false guilt in your relationships. You feel overly responsible for people and you feel that you should be able to convince them about what's right and what they should do. And when you can't convince them, you haven't tried hard enough. You have a hard time watching other people suffer with the consequences of their choices, and you feel like something you have done has caused it. You believe that you should be able to take care of other people and prevent them from having to experience that pain. You're easily manipulated by people who use guilt to get what they want. Dysfunctional people are really, really good at identifying a person's weak points and knowing how they can exploit that to get what they want. Emotionally blackmailing you using guilt to make you give in to them. So they'll try to make you feel guilty for something, and then you'll feel like it must be my fault, I better do what they say. Maybe you believe that God wants you to sacrifice for others, and you feel guilty when you say no, especially when the other person isn't happy with you and expresses their disapproval. This guilt originates from confusion over whether or not it really is okay to say no and take care of yourself. The guilt can be so uncomfortable for you that you would just rather give in, give the other person what they want, what they're asking for, rather than say no, because that guilt can be so uncomfortable and overwhelming. The belief that God expects you to help others no matter what, without limits, can drive you to give out of a sense of urgency and necessity because you feel so responsible for other people, making you feel guilty when you haven't done anything wrong. If saying no and taking care of yourself isn't the right thing to do for you, and you don't believe that God wants you to, whenever you do and somebody is upset with you, you're going to feel like you've done something wrong and you're going to feel guilty. So if you hold any of those beliefs, you are going to be particularly vulnerable to feeling false guilt in your relationships. Instead, these are some truths that you need to remember. Each person is responsible for themselves. You are responsible for you, and the other person is responsible for themselves. You are not responsible for what another person chooses to do or chooses not to do. God's going to hold each of us responsible. We're all going to give an account of our lives before God at the judgment seat. We're not going to be able to talk about the other person. We're going to answer for our choices. You are not responsible for other people's choices. You have a right to say no. You need to give out of choice, not compulsion. You don't have to take care of other people. You don't have to meet their every demand. You don't have to do everything that they ask you to do. It isn't wrong to say no to take care of yourself. It isn't wrong to say no because you're operating from a place of choice, giving out of choice rather than compulsion. If somebody is emotionally manipulating you, recognize that they're doing that. Recognize that they're trying to get you to feel false guilt, just to get you to give in to their demands. When you refuse to let false guilt control you, at first, when you're used to feeling guilty about so much, you're going to have to talk yourself through it. You're going to have to listen to your thoughts, pay attention, tell yourself, it's okay for me to say no. It's okay for me to take care of myself. It's okay for me to have boundaries. It's okay for me to say no to manipulation. I do not have to feel guilt unless I have truly done something wrong. The false guilt is going to be around for a while. You're going to have to rely on what you know to be true and ignore those false feelings of guilt. And after you do it time after time after time, before you know it, the false guilt is going to kind of drop off, and you're going to have a better gauge for what is truly wrong about your behavior in a relationship and what is truly right. Ask God to help you discern today between false guilt and true guilt.